Welcome to On the Middle East, our podcast on the big and interesting stories unfolding in our region. My name is Ambryn Zaman, and this week's guest is Benyamin Poghosyan, a senior research fellow at the Applied Policy Research Institute of Armenia. Benyamin unpacks recent developments in the Armenia-Azerbaijan peace talks, which are directly linked to Armenia's normalization process with Turkey. Over the past few weeks, there's been growing pressure from Washington for the sides to sign a deal, but Azerbaijan continues to resist those demands, seeking ever more concessions from Armenia. Ankara has made it clear that it will neither establish diplomatic ties nor open its land border with Armenia until Azerbaijan says it's okay. So welcome to the program, Benyamin. I know you're super busy, so very grateful to have you on our program today.
Ambryn, hello, and thanks for having me.
So, Benyamin, there's a lot of buzz about the possibility of a peace agreement being signed between Armenia and Azerbaijan that may lead Turkey to establish diplomatic ties with Armenia and to open its land borders with it. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has been urging Azerbaijan in particular to sign the agreement that's now, I believe, in its 10th version. And he's invited Armenian President Ilham Aliyev and Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan to the NATO summit in Washington. So what's going on? Are we on the verge of peace, Benyamin?
Ambryn, you are right. We see a lot of diplomatic efforts by the United States, almost at the highest level, to have something signed between Armenia and Azerbaijan. I would not call it a peace agreement, because peace agreement means some final document which will fix all details, will clarify everything. All understand that this is not going to happen, at least by the end of 2024, for different reasons, but mainly because Azerbaijan does not want it, and Azerbaijan puts more and more preconditions for this real, detailed peace agreement, including to change Armenian constitution. There are talks about Western Azerbaijan to bring Azerbaijanis into Armenia, hundreds of thousands, extraterritorial corridor. Now President Aliyev speaks that Armenia should recognize Khojaly genocide. So a lot of preconditions on real peace agreement, and all understand that this is not going to happen, I believe, neither by the end of 2024 or even by the end of 2025. But what Americans want, at least this is my understanding, to have something signed. This something we may call a framework agreement, or we may call it agreement on principles, which in reality will change very little, if anything, on Armenia-Azerbaijan relations. But United States hopes that even this framework agreement or agreement on principles may open the door for Armenia-Turkey normalization. My understanding is that the key goal and the key target of the United States is not to solve Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict and bring permanent peace between Armenia and Azerbaijan. I think Americans are too smart to understand that this is not going to happen. It's simply impossible. The key target and key goal is to change the status quo on Armenia-Turkey relations and have something on Armenia-Turkey normalization process. We all know that US was pushing for Armenia-Turkey normalization in the last 30 years. There were a lot of effort in 2008, 2009, so-called football diplomacy, which was mostly undermined by Azerbaijan, and then these restored efforts after 2020 Nagorno-Karabakh war. And why it's important for the United States, this Armenia-Turkey normalization or change of status quo? Because Americans understand that if you really want Armenia to decrease its dependency on Russia, if you really want Armenia to start to really move away from Russia, not just to make statements, but really move away from Russia, Armenia needs normal relations with Turkey.
Can I just jump in, though, and ask you the following question? Why do you believe that Azerbaijan is not interested in peace?
Okay, good question. I here see several reasons. One is definitely domestic politics. We all know what kind of state is Azerbaijan. and what kind of regime is President Aliyev's regime. These type of regimes, they always need an external enemy to rally population around him, to explain all the problems which Azerbaijani society have, starting from lack of basic freedoms, lack of rule of law, up to the significant poverty and huge inequality. When the country has tens of billions of dollars of oil and gas revenue, but hundreds of thousands, I would say millions of Azerbaijanis are living in poverty, while there is a very small circle who lives in ultimate luxury. So in this kind of situation, you need an external enemy to say that, yes, a lot of things are wrong in Azerbaijan, or maybe are wrong in Azerbaijan, but you should support me because I will solve our national issues. And in 2003, when President Aliyev succeeded his father, Heydar Aliyev, he said that, okay, guys, let's make a deal. You will tolerate my family rule with all its problems. And I promise I will realize our national dream. Azerbaijani flag, again, will be in Stepanakert and Shushi, or in Khankendi and Shusha, as Azerbaijanis are telling. So this was a deal, and my understanding is that Azerbaijani society accepted this deal. However, this deal is over. September 2023, military takeover of Nagorno-Karabakh, complete military takeover of Nagorno-Karabakh, forced displacement of all Armenians, so 0 Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh, Azerbaijani flags, so deal is over. But President Aliyev's family rule is not over. He was just re-elected for another 7 years until 2031. Maybe he has plans to be re-elected for 2038. We all know that his wife is first vice president, or maybe his son Heydar Aliyev can become another representative of Aliyev as a president. So family rule has not ended, and most probably President Aliyev has no wish or no plan to end family rule, which means that they need another deal. So my understanding is that Armenia as an external enemy is a part of this another deal, and also this concept of Western Azerbaijan, which is aggressively being pushed by President Aliyev, that almost entire Armenia was a part of Azerbaijani homeland, that Armenians ethnically cleansed Azerbaijanis, and some strange stories about even genocide of Azerbaijanis committed by Armenians. All these, I think, are efforts to create another national dream, to say that, okay, guys, you tolerate my family rule for 20 years, and I realize our national dream, but this was part of our national dream. We have another part of our national dream, the restoration of Western Azerbaijan. Please tolerate me another 20 years, me, my wife, or my son, and somewhere in 2044, I promise we will see Azerbaijani flags, if not in Yerevan, at least in many parts of Armenia. So this is a domestic political reason.
The domestic political reason, are there any other reasons that you could share with us?
And geopolitically, I think both Azerbaijan and Turkey has a strategic vision that they should have common border. I'm not speaking about connections, routes, corridors, common border. And if you look into the map, the shortest way to establish this common border is southern part of Armenia. Because currently, the southern part of Armenia, in some places, as narrow as 25 kilometers, and the widest part is only 44 kilometers, divide Azerbaijan from Turkey. Azerbaijan from Nakhichevan Autonomous Republic, which itself already has a common border with Turkey. And we see, especially after September 2023, how much emphasis President Aliyev pushes on this Turkic world and Azerbaijani policy to unite this Turkic world, organization of Turkic states. And President Aliyev many times stated that the Sunnic region of Armenia artificially divides this huge entire Turkic world, which spans from Istanbul up to Kazakhstan-China border. And he says that this is a historical injustice. This was due to Bolsheviks, so we should correct this historical injustice. So if you, at the end of the day, want to take part of southern Armenia, probably you do not need real peace agreement and permanent stability.
Well, we also know that Azerbaijan claims parts of Turkey as well, and that, very conveniently doesn't come up in any of these statements, and Turkey doesn't bring it up either. But setting that aside, of course, none of this will be easy for Azerbaijan if it, decides to pursue that course of further aggression. First of all, we know that Iran is very much opposed to the creation of this corridor, the Zangezur corridor, that would separate it from the rest of Armenia, from most of Armenia, because there'd only be a tiny wedge of Armenia left between that corridor and Iran. So what can Iran do to prevent this from happening? What will the Western world do if indeed Azerbaijan embarks on such a campaign? And most importantly, where does Russia stand in all of this?
First of all, Azerbaijan understands that yes, it will not be easy to take southern part of Armenia, but let's be very frank. For example, in 2003, when President Aliyev just elected for the first time, it was not easy to take Nagorno-Karabakh and kick out all Armenians from Nagorno-Karabakh. So this is the long game. When I'm speaking about strategic vision to establish border with Turkey, it does not mean that there is a deadline. We should do that by the end of 24 or by the end of 2025, or this is not going to happen. This is a long game. This, from Azerbaijani perspective, this can be happen 1 year from now, 5 years from now, but you should always keep the window for geopolitical opportunities. So this no peace, no war situation will always keep these opportunities. The opportunity may arise now, it may arise in 2027, it may never rise, but it may also rise in 2033. So this is Azerbaijani position. This is a long game. There is no deadlines. Okay, we failed to do it in 2025. We forget about that. Definitely no. Of course, Iran will do everything to prevent this because it's a direct threat to Iran national security. Iran does not want to be fully encircled in its northern part by Turkish population, Turkey and Azerbaijan, and Iran does not want to lose its alternative access to the Black Sea via Armenia and Georgia. So it's a very challenging question to ask if Azerbaijani troops enter Syunik, what Iranians will do. Theoretically, Iranians may intervene militarily, sending troops to Syunik. Let's not forget that Iranian troops just on the next bank of the river. And Iran is definitely military strong power, at least in comparison of Azerbaijan. So I don't exclude the military intervention by Iran, but of course it's like an hypothetical question, what if? But definitely this will be against Iranian vital interests. Let's jump into Russia. Russia believes that South Caucasus, as any part of the former Soviet space, may be beside Baltic republics. These are the areas of its legitimate special interests. So from Russian perspective, Russia should be #1 player in South Caucasus. If not only player, okay, it's not possible because you cannot kick out Turkey, Iran, United States, European Union, India, China, but Russia should be the player #1. But as far as war wages in Ukraine, Russia lacks resources to focus on South Caucasus. So from Russian perspective, I think they are now a status quo power. They definitely were not happy to see Nagorno-Karabakh Armenians kicked out from Azerbaijan because Karabakh Armenians were most pro-Russian population in South Caucasus for last several centuries. And Nagorno-Karabakh Armenians were one of the pillars of Russian influence in South Caucasus. Russia lost that pillar, and also Russia lost peacekeeping in Nagorno-Karabakh.
But is that because
I strongly believe that no one
stop it, or it just? I mean, why? Why is Russia so weak that it couldn't stop it?
Okay, my understanding is that this was because Russia now is not able to significantly counter Azerbaijan and Turkey. And Russia does not need any significant problems with Azerbaijan and Turkey as far as war continues in Ukraine. But I am sure that Kremlin could not be happy to see zero Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh, not because Russia loves Armenians, but because, again, Nagorno-Karabakh Armenians was a leverage for Russia to put pressure both on Azerbaijan and Armenia. They lost this leverage, but still, I think at least Russia would like to keep this post-September 2023 status quo. What status quo I'm speaking about? At least military presence in Armenia, Russian military base, Russian border troops still deployed along Armenia-Turkey, Armenia-Iran border. Armenia still is a member of Eurasian Economic Union and legally still member of Collective Security Treaty Organization. Armenia suspended its membership, but legally still, Armenia is a fully part of CSTO. So Russian position is this, as far as we have confrontation with the West and war continues in Ukraine, we do not need any significant changes in South Caucasus because any changes most probably will bring more harm to Russia and will decrease Russian influence more. So let's at least keep the current status quo. I mean, post-September 2023 status quo. To ask your question directly, what will Russia do if Azerbaijan launches large-scale aggression against Armenia to take Syunik, or to take part of Syunik and establish direct border with Turkey? My understanding is if war in Ukraine will continue, I don't believe Russia will do anything militarily. I don't believe Russia will intervene militarily, even if there is a large-scale aggression of Azerbaijan against Armenia, if war in Ukraine continues.
Well, that's terribly dangerous for Armenia then, because Azerbaijan is likely to attack sooner rather than later, because the war won't go on indefinitely.
I fully agree. First of all, we should accept that when Azerbaijan took all Nagorno-Karabakh, this significantly increased vulnerability of southern part of Armenia, because it's simply, as I said, now it's sandwiched between Azerbaijan and Nakhichevan Autonomous Republic, or Azerbaijan and Turkey. And if you ask what is the number one hard power deterrence, like why Azerbaijan is not attacking Syunik today or yesterday or tomorrow, I would put number one is Iran's position, because if Russia most probably will not intervene militarily, you cannot be sure. Iran's military intervention, I would assess 50-50. And 50% possibility is significant for President Aliyev to assess its steps. Also, of course, there is a possibility of sanctions by the European Union and the United States. EU sanctions, I don't believe, because EU sanctions requires unanimity. All 27 states should vote. And we all know that Azerbaijan has strategic partnership with several European countries selling oil and gas, buying weapons. Even I can name these countries: Italy, Hungary, probably Romania, and others. So I'm not too very much optimistic about any tough sanctions from the EU, but the United States, it's a one country. So probably United States would not like to see, again in the post-Soviet space, one country taking another country and taking territories by force, because this will resemble what Russia is doing in Ukraine, which from United States perspective is absolutely unacceptable. But also, let's not forget that the United States is interested to see Turkey-Azerbaijan connection, because US wants to see more Turkey in South Caucasus, and US wants to see more Turkey in Central Asia. So it's a really interesting configuration. From one point, the United States does not want Azerbaijan occupying Armenian territory to open the corridor, but the United States want to see this connection between Turkey and Azerbaijan is opened, but mostly through some dialogue or through some agreement.
But here again, Armenia faces a huge problem, because these normalization talks between Turkey and Armenia, which kicked off in January 2022, have yielded practically zero for Armenia, zero. Turkey has not even allowed third-party nationals to cross through the land border, as it promised it would. Not even this commercial cargo by air, even that hasn't started, because we all know that Turkey is in perfect lockstep with Baku on this issue, and if anything is using the process to advance Azerbaijan's interests. Secondly, we also know that if Turkey decided to go against Azerbaijan's wishes and normalize with Armenia, the next thing that would likely happen is that Azerbaijan would then start stirring up domestic public opinion in Turkey, using nationalists in Turkey, nationalist MPs, very much as it did back in 2009 when the Zurich protocols were signed. And in those days, Erdogan was, despite having all this executive power today, was stronger. Today, after the March 31 municipal polls, we're seeing him weakened politically. So it's that much less likely, in my opinion at least, that Turkey will move forward. So where does that leave Armenia, and what does that document that the Americans want Azerbaijan to sign, well, both to sign, even mean, as you said?
Okay, I fully agree with you that Turkey will do nothing without green lighting from Azerbaijan. And here we are coming back to the beginning of our conversation. Why Americans are pushing something to be signed between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Okay, you may call it agreement on principles, you may call it framework agreement. I believe Americans don't care about the title. They need at least one sheet of paper with President Aliyev and Prime Minister Pashinyan's signature, then flying to Ankara, show it to Mr. Erdogan and said, okay, Mr. Erdogan, you told that you will do nothing as far as there is no agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Here you are. Please put your eyeglasses. Do you see President Aliyev's signature, Prime Minister Pashinyan's signature? Now starts the process. So my understanding is, and I don't exclude, that even Americans got some reassurances from Turkey that regardless what the title of this document is going to be, if something will be signed and there will be the joint signature of Armenian and Azerbaijani leaders on any piece of paper, this could be useful or could be enough for Turkey to start something. Because again, as I mentioned, the key target for Americans is not Armenia-Azerbaijan peace, is not Armenia-Azerbaijan normalization. The key target is Armenia-Turkey normalization, which from American point of view will significantly change the regional status quo and will allow Armenia to really start move away from Russia.
Well, several things. First of all, it's Azerbaijan, my understanding, that's pushing this document, not the Americans, and that Armenia is saying, no, if we sign anything, it has to be a real peace agreement. We're not going to sign anything that gives you diplomatic cover ahead of COP29, which will be hosted in Baku in November, that will allow you to sort of hold the Europeans, the Americans at bay by being able to say, hey guys, look, I've just signed this document. And I think it's highly unlikely that even if it were to be signed by both parties, that Turkey would move, because again, even the slightest bit of movement on the Turkey-Armenia front, I think is, as Baku perceives things, totally against its national interest. So I don't see that things will really advance on that front, particularly if Pashinyan sticks to his guns, because my understanding is that Armenia is not ready to do this. And the big fear, and you probably hear this articulated, is that once COP29 is over, and if particularly Donald Trump is reelected, Azerbaijan will feel it has full reign to, revert to its aggression.
Okay, few observations. First, frankly speaking, I'm not so much sure that Armenia will reject to sign this framework agreement, because back in November 2022, Prime Minister Pashinyan publicly stated that we are ready to sign framework agreement on the principles. So I don't believe that Armenian government will reject to sign framework agreement, because Armenian government also needs some positive news on foreign policy front. Because last 4 years, Armenia only faces defeats and humiliation. So Armenian government needs something positive. And even this framework agreement, or whatever you may call it, agreement on principles, could be used by Armenian government, at least domestically, to show the people that, look, our peace agenda at least gave something.
But
Yes, this is not full peace agreement, but still.
You called it a fake agreement when we spoke in Yerevan. So you agree that it's...
Yeah. No, I'm telling that this will not change anything on Armenia-Azerbaijan, really. But at least, but again, this can be used by domestic political motive for Armenian government to say that, yes, this is not a full peace agreement. Maybe this will not change too much thing, but at least it's better to have something than nothing. So my understanding is that if tomorrow President Aliyev will say, okay, I'm ready to sign this framework agreement or agreement on principles, I will be highly surprised if this time Armenia will say, no, no, no. Second, regarding the potential likelihood of escalation, of course, if nothing happens, everything remains as the same, then starting from spring 2025, possibility of escalation rises. But frankly speaking, I would not put everything on US presidential elections, because again, as I mentioned, it's not the United States which plays #1 deterring role for Azerbaijan not attacking Armenia, to say that, okay, Americans told Azerbaijan never attack Armenia, and when Trump will be elected, and then Trump will call President Aliyev and say, I don't care, please attack and do whatever with Armenia what you want. As I mentioned, as of now, the #1 hard power deterrence preventing Azerbaijan from attacking is the position of Islamic Republic of Iran. So from this perspective, I think from Armenian perspective, it's much more important domestic political developments of Iran, like what will happen after these presidential elections, second runoff, I think, on July 5. But the key issue is what will happen and how will be the transition of the highest power in Iran, because we all know that president in Islamic Republic of Iran is not the ultimate decision maker. But again, for me, from Armenian perspective, the development in Iran and potential change in Iran position will have more influence on Azerbaijani calculations, attack Armenia or not to attack, than potential change in White House.
That's a pretty strong statement, Benjamin. Thank you so very much for joining us here today. And we hope to have you on our program soon again. Thank you.
Amber, thank you.
This brings us to the end of another episode of On the Middle East. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Benjamin, and please do go to our website www.al-monitor.com for in-depth analysis on the Middle East. And don't forget to look up my story from Armenia, where I spent several days reporting on the topics that I discussed with Benjamin. Thank you and goodbye.